The Green view is very simple on Brexit, that we trust the British people, and we would, without doubt, give the British people the final say in the Brexit negotiations. So whatever, we assume it's Theresa May, comes back within 2 years' time, we would put that in front of the people in a referendum with a clear choice. We either take that deal or we stay in the EU. It's a common sense approach. And well, as it may be, I'm telling you what the Green Party's position on Brexit is, that we will have a second referendum on the terms of whatever is negotiated. I'm not, what's wrong with a referendum? A referendum is a perfectly legitimate way of finding out what people think. It's an absolutely positive thing, and we should be having referendums in this country. In the current state of our system, where we have a first-past-the-post system, which is so not fit for purpose, at least a referendum is asking people something important. And for me, that is the other key issue in this election campaign. The fact that proportional representation is not being discussed. And we have a ridiculous first-past-the-post system. We are isolated in Europe in terms of the number of other countries who all have decent proportional systems. We have a decent proportional system in Scotland, we have one in the Welsh Assembly, in the London Assembly. It's time to make a change and to have a decent proportional system for all of our national elections. It wasn't, in 2011, it wasn't a referendum about proportional representation. AV is not a proportional system. So for the Green Party, we would be saying for the Brexit negotiations, have a second referendum. The more referendums, the fairer voting system, the better we will all be.
Bearing in mind that Theresa May said this was a Brexit election, we have heard absolutely nothing about what she envisages that to be. What is Brexit? I'm sure there are many, many different ideas here tonight. It's a word that's entered our vocabulary. It's kind of a cartoon word, but I don't think we really understand it. The referendum was, to me, it looked like an internal Tory party exercise. I think a serious change in the way, kind of the equivalent of a constitutional change, a serious change to the way society functions should happen not just on an in-out majority, but it needs to be the way a company would run its affairs by something like a two-thirds majority, a period to reflect and understand actually what we're doing, because often the questions come after the decision. That's what's happened now. And then you have another vote. You have another resounding vote which needs a two-thirds majority, something along those lines, because I think if we're honest, have we actually considered what this means, or are we just having a fight about something that's a little bit remote? It's very emotional to a lot of people, but the reality is it's so pragmatic and it is so complicated. It is decades and decades of the way this country has evolved, and I would really challenge anyone to be an expert on Brexit. I think there are very few of us. And therefore, I think it's absolutely irresponsible to be doing something so quickly that is so harmful. I haven't met any, maybe somebody will challenge me tonight, but I have spent the past year talking to local businesses in South Cambs, and on balance, overwhelmingly, I have not heard anyone who runs a business or a school or a farm say, this is going to help me. What they're saying is, we are going to do our best. It's going to be tough. We've got to do our best. We've got to project a positive demeanor, because we have to keep our staff morale up. But actually, my God, we have real problems on our hands. So I'm amazed that after 4 weeks of this general election campaign, we still don't know what Theresa May thinks, and yet she's going to be in charge of it. It makes me furious.
Dan. Okay, thank you for the question. I don't know if I've heard the answers that clearly to what you said, because you actually said do you think Theresa May is a person who's really able to deliver on that deal, considering the record so far? And I heard somebody just over here bring up to my attention, thank you, about U-turns. And the first time in our history we've had U-turns in a manifesto. Before, I mean, you normally have a U-turn after the election with certain parties, but to consider they did it before the election, I find slightly surprising. The position at the moment I am a bit worried about, because actually we've seen a lot of threatening. I mean, in the way that Theresa May tries to treat 27 other sovereign nations, it's a bit like Trump telling Mexico to pay for the wall. And I think that's really quite worrying, because this is, Susan's right in certainly that regard, that this is the most important decision for a generation. This election, by the way, is not about the next 5 years. It's going to affect the children who aren't even born yet. And that is really important to get to the heart of that issue. Now, I know that I'm in the Lib Dem zone here, and I quite welcome as a Daniel being in the lion's den, so I'm going to go for this. I fundamentally disagree with the Liberal Democrat position on the second referendum. And before you say it's not a second referendum, I'm actually quoting what Susan said in the Cambridge Stays survey only last week. And that's the problem. I think it's a muddled way of thinking. A democratic decision was made that I don't agree with, but it's democratic. A referendum, or referenda is a plural, because it's actually a Greek word, is actually not part of our system. Yes, we can have them superimposed after onto our system, but it means that weak governments push the decision out to the population. Now, what if, my Lib Dem friends, what if you have a second referendum and it turns out that Boris Johnson comes rolling back out again, going wobbly, 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 and Michael Gove comes out being vindictive and nasty and Govish, and then he says to people, you know what, you decided last time to leave the European Union, and now all these people don't want to respect your democratic decision, and by the way, it's actually £600 million an hour for the NHS. And then they decide to vote to leave the European Union. I know this because I actually worked for Cambridge Radio 5 as a volunteer. I made a programme about this for the station. I went to Peterborough, I interviewed there 15 people who all said, bar one, they wanted to vote for leave, and I cannot see them changing their mind. It would mean that Parliament's hands would be tied, and then you'd be crashing out with no deal, because apparently that's better than any sort of deal whatsoever. That is why I have a slightly different option, and I hope you'll actually give me just a moment to explain. Parliament should be the place where leadership is shown in our country. And I say that it's the MPs who should decide on a free vote, not a whipped vote, because that is wrong. A free vote if we accept the deal for our country. And I would argue personally, as your MP, if I was in that situation and I saw a car crash coming for our country, I wouldn't give away my responsibility and say, let the country decide, and then, oh, whoops, that was bad, we'll have to do it now. I would actually stand up and show leadership on this issue, and that is what we're sorely lacking when it comes to the Tory position, and unfortunately I also think a second referendum is lacking that leadership to fight for what we believe in. So that is the Labour position, that is my position, and I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think the last hustings, this didn't come up, and it's something that I'm passionate about, so thank you so much for that.
Well, Susan's right, it is going to be tough, and we are going to do our best, and I'll tell you why we're going to do our best, because every single man, woman and child and business in this country needs us to do our best. Because we have got to make a success of this for them. This is democracy. We might not all like the result. I was a Remainer. But the minute we start ignoring the democratic will of the people in this country, we are slipping very quickly towards the kind of banana republic I don't want to live in. So we have to accept the result. But drawing on Dan's point, he's right. Parliament does need to have a say on the deal. And I was one of the about 11 of us Tory MPs who pushed government to giving Parliament a vote on the final deal. And we will have that vote, because that is where parliamentary sovereignty kicks in. It is our responsibility to safe check it and make sure that it does deliver what we need for this country. And locally here in South Cambs, I actually think we've got a really strong card to play. Our constituency is one of the very few in this country that actually positively contributes to the UK tax coffers. Not many places can say that in the country, and we have to leverage that, because it means that the deal will only work for the UK if it works for us. And if our economy doesn't prosper, then the UK doesn't prosper. And that, to me, is a very, very powerful card to play in the game. So quite frankly, if I'm re-elected as your MP, I am not going to waste time, precious time, resisting Brexit from happening. I'm going to grasp that opportunity, leverage that opportunity we have with every fibre in my being and make the best of it. Because this Brexit deal will only work if it works for us, and an MP's responsibility is to leverage that and make absolutely certain that our voice, the South Cambridgeshire voice, is heard at the negotiating table.